Hello, this is Jeffrey McEldowney, and I am here today to give a message to y'all, something that's been on my heart, and I hope y'all like it. It will be in Daniel chapter 1, and it will be in Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 through 18, and Daniel 3 as well, again, 25 through 27. Beginning in verse 8 of chapter 1 of Daniel. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now, chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. And verse 25 to 27. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth, come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire, and the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. I like this book. The book of Daniel is actually is a favorite book of mine. You can learn a lot from these chapters, and you can make so many messages. You can apply a lot to your lives from this book, and it's just one of my favorite books. So tonight, this morning, we'll be going over 4 men. We'll be looking at 4 men here that took a stand for what is right. And even though it would cost them their very lives, even though it didn't cost them their lives in the end, but it would have if God didn't intervene. We ought to have the same mindset as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those are the biblical names. I don't really like to call them by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Belteshazzar for Daniel. I don't like calling them by that because that's not the names that they were given by God. We ought to dare to be a Daniel. We ought to dare, or as the saying goes, dare to be a Daniel. We ought to dare to be a Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah every day of our lives. And first of all, I want you to notice they didn't bend. You find that in verse 8 of chapter 1. In this verse, we find that Daniel and the other 3 had purpose in their hearts that they were not going to defile themselves with the king's meat or drink. So Daniel requested of the prince of the eunuchs, that he and his friends would not defile themselves, and Daniel requested that they be proved 10 days, with pulse to eat and water to drink. That's beans, and that's pretty much lentils or beans and water. And the results were in their favor, as we all know. They appeared fairer and fatter than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. We find that in verse number We find that in verse 15 of chapter 1. God blessed in this situation. He blessed them in all manners of wisdom and knowledge. Thus, they were able to stand before the king. Just show that it pays to obey God in everything we do. They didn't bend, as we see. Second of all, I want you to notice they didn't bow. We find this in verse 16 through 18 of chapter 3. They didn't bow. Now I want to shift our attention to the latter three, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, for the remainder of the message. For they took a great stand, and it cost them, in the result of them being thrown in a burning fiery furnace. They did not bow, because it was wrong, and they were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar gave them one last chance to bow before that golden image, to which they replied that they were not careful to answer him in this matter. They voiced their faith in God, that he will deliver them from the burning fiery furnace and deliver them from his hand. But if God didn't deliver them from the furnace, they still would not bow before the golden image. They knew that God was going to deliver them either way, whether it be by delivering them completely from both, or just from the hand of the king. And so the king had them thrown into the burning fiery furnace, and that leads us to our last point. They didn't burn, in verses 25 through 27. We find here that God did deliver them from the burning fiery furnace and from the king's hand. The king had the furnace heated up 7 times hotter that day, then bound them up with ropes and thrown them into the furnace. And the guy that threw them in died from the extreme heat. Then Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, because he saw them loosed and walking about, and there was a fourth like unto the Son of God. That just shows that God is going to be with you in your trials and your tribulations. He's there with you every step of the way. And so Nebuchadnezzar had them brought out of the furnace, and there was no hurt or evidence that the fire even touched them. And in verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar gives God honor and glory. God can get honor and glory out of any situation. Conclusion. I'll conclude with this, sorry. These 4 young men took a stand for what was right, and God greatly blessed them for it. We all need to learn how to take a stand for what is right, regardless of what the consequences are or are not. For these young men didn't bend, they didn't bow, and they didn't burn. Well, that is the end of this little segment. I would appreciate if you leave a like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.